Today, we talk about different models of reflective practice. Hello and welcome to Teacher Learning Cast, episode number 23, this day, September 29th, 2018. My name is Benjamin Stewart, calling from beautiful Aguascalientes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Piry Herrera, also here in Aguascalientes. Hoping you had a nice week and you are getting ready for the weekend. Today, we get together again to talk, share, and put on the table certain topics and see what we can do or what we can say about it, and in order to reflect and learn a little bit more. Benjamin, good morning.
Good morning, Piry. Always happy to have this time each week to talk about different educational topics. You know, we talk a lot throughout the week as we work in a BA program in English language teaching at the Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes. And so we have a lot of opportunities to throw around ideas. This week, the topic was something that I came across reading a book that I wanted to share with you regarding reflective practice. But before we get into that topic, I want to talk and really invite everyone who's watching this broadcast. I know we have a lot of followers on Facebook. We, in fact, have a Facebook page called Teacher Learning Cast. So we really encourage everyone to reach out, give us feedback, let us know what your thoughts are on any of the topics that we talk about. We're always looking for teachers to come and actually join our broadcast. In fact, this week, as I've done in the past couple of weeks, I've started to include our live link to our live broadcast. So if you want to come in and actually pop in and say a few things or discuss whatever we're talking about that particular day, we encourage you to do that. This week in particular, I also shared in a couple of other communities in Facebook, other Facebook pages that are for English teachers here in Mexico, since we teach in Mexico. So we are trying to broaden our approach and try to reach as many people as possible. And again, we have a Facebook page, and we have set it up for those who are interested in the topics that we're talking about. But I think the main takeaway of what we're doing is to really encourage any teacher, whether you're teaching English or just general education, to find those communities that resonate with you so that you are part of the conversation. You're part of the solution, as it were. But we really encourage you to reach out and get involved in your own personal development.
Right, we're trying to create this network, this interpersonal connection with everybody else, with the idea of enriching ourselves. So it's in that sense, right? Because we want to bring some better practices to our classroom and see what is in trend, what comments, what ideas, what other paths can we take in our classes. And obviously, we are willing also to share with you whatever you want to hear, whatever question you have. Whatever we say in here, it's mainly our opinion and our thoughts about it. But whatever you want to ask, it's going to encourage us to look for more information and to be ready for you all, guys.
Absolutely. So feel free to reach out and leave us feedback. Again, we're on Facebook, Teacher Learning Cast. We have a dedicated public page there that you can join and find all of the past recordings that we have made. It's hard to believe we've already got 22 broadcasts, Piry. We started in February of this year. And so we've really accumulated over, I would say, 23 to 24 hours of content, all specifically related to different aspects of education regarding teaching, learning, a lot of different topics we've talked about in the past. So again, check out our Facebook page, because I think that's the best place to really find that content that perhaps you've missed if you are just joining us for the first time. So yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and dive right in, Piry, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen so that you can see here what I'm looking at. Today's discussion really was motivated by a book that I started reading this week called Becoming a Reflective Teacher. And this kind of relates a lot to some prior conversations, Piry, that we've had. You talked a lot about flow in prior episodes of Teacher Learning Cast. I know you also presented at a conference on the topic, really related to this author, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I think is, if I'm pronouncing the word right, her name. But I think that it's worth throwing out a couple of other ideas. This book, in fact, mentions this author. It mentions flow, but it also contrasts with other different models of reflective teaching. So today, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Wanted to take a couple of excerpts out of the book and have some of your thoughts, Petey, because I know you work a lot with teaching practicum. And I know that we talk a lot about reflective teaching in general in our own practice. So I kind of wanted to throw out some different ideas, different models that have been researched in the past to get some of your insight, as well as those who are watching our broadcast. Feel free to share your experiences with reflective teaching and any of the topics here that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because that's my approach. I always like getting different views and then taking a little bit from this and a little bit from there, just to give you a hint. And in my master's degree thesis, I wrote about autonomous learning, but I mix it up with learning community. So how about that?
Yeah, so this is going to be right up your alley and hopefully right up the alleys of others as well. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and start thinking, discussing here about the first excerpt that I came across. And I'm going to quote from the book here. Again, all the quotes are coming from this book, Becoming a Reflective Teacher by Robert Marzano. So this first quote says, deliberate practice differs from the prior view of practice, that is, working with a autonomic behavior, because individuals engaged in deliberate practice tend to resist automaticity. And so this kind of contrasts slightly with this idea of flow, in that really the objective of really practice is for things to become automatic, that skills and knowledge just kind of come together in this idea of flow. And this contrasting view actually says the opposite, that it's really about adapting to new situations, and you never really reach this level of automaticity, but that you are really learning more to adapt to different contexts, and you're learning to weave in and out of these new experiences. And so this is the first notion, the first idea I wanted to throw out here with you, Petey, is, what are your thoughts about this idea of flow that really seeks automaticity versus a deliberate practice that really says, well, we don't really ever nothing becomes automatic, that it's just we become better at adapting to new situations?
Yeah, in fact, if we go for the idea of automaticity, then the flow stops, right? Because pretty much when you get something master or something like automatic and there is no change in any sense, then that's exactly pretty much the idea, that you get stuck a little bit and there is no moving forward through the flow in the sense, in the idea of the flow. But yes, I totally agree. There's always something to better. There's always something to transform. There's always something to adapt, and we need to keep on forward, looking for ways and paths to cope with this impromptu changes that may need to be done when you're in front of a classroom.
It's interesting because I think we can relate to classes where things are going really well, and we feel that there is a sense of flow, right? That things are just going well, and the students are engaged, activities are flowing one to the next, they're asking questions, and you just feel like there is a sense of flow. So I find I'm kind of like thinking back and forth, like, yeah, there is this idea of flow, that, yeah, we do want to reach this idea that, yeah, things are just moving along. But this idea of deliberate practice really says that, it's not so much about that idea of flow. It's really looking for those new those new experiences, those cases where maybe we're not comfortable. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, where are we really willing to accept challenges that are maybe that extend beyond our comfort zone, And are we willing to take some of those risks, so even though we don't feel at the moment that there is this quote unquote flow?
Yeah, well, the first thing in there is that being static is going to be a problem in that sense, because too much of the same thing, no matter how good it is not that good, right? In fact, during this week, I was talking to some students that were teaching in our course in teaching workshop, which is their second semester, simulating classes amongst themselves. And precisely, I had a couple of students who are doing a fine job. They are doing something a little bit kind of traditional, but with a little touch of fluency and dynamism in the class. And it looks fine and everything goes okay. But then this was exactly part of the discussion. What's going to happen when you come with these kind of classes every single day to the same students? And then and it all started because another student mentioned, you make me feel like I was in high school, with the best of intention in the comments, right? But when we started to reflect about the situation, it ended up not being that good. That idea of, you make me feel like in high school, right? Because then at the end we had this static moment in the teacher, in which we are looking at pretty much very familiar standard procedures, which at the end tend to, in this case, we talked about getting a very regular class, which tends to be boring. Right.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about my own context too, about this idea of, we may feel that we're in flow, that things are going really well, and even look and visually as we observe our students feel that things are going well. But I think we could also accept the fact that we can be misled, and we can think that things are going well when actually the students either aren't that happy about the class, they don't feel that they're like they're learning. One of the things that I started this semester in my Prope group, I'm teaching a writing course for first semester students who are about at an A2 English proficiency level. And one of the things I started to do this semester was to ask them to maintain a weekly journal. So every week they share with me a paragraph describing and reflecting on what they learned for that week, what was difficult for them this week, what they liked, what they disliked. And besides the fact of them, practicing the writing skill, right, it also helps me as the instructor to gain insight about how I think things are going, right? So I don't just rely on my own perception of the class, but I'm actually reaching out to my students and getting that information firsthand. Now, that's not always easy to do, because if you ask them to be honest, most of the time they are going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to be in a frame of mind that says, okay, I'm willing to accept these comments, positive or negative, so that, with the intention of then, changing your practice as necessary, right, to try to accommodate for as many students as possible. So, I mean, that's a practical tip that's been in the literature, and it's nothing new, but I think it's very effective. And any way that you can reach out to your students to really find how they perceive the class, I think that will definitely help inform you as the instructor to see, okay, are we in this quote unquote flow? Are we going along well? And even if you feel that you're trying something new and you think it's a disaster, it could be that they even appreciate something different, something new in their class, and that it could work the other way, and that you might actually get information from the students to say they are enjoying the class, they feel like they're learning, even though you, the instructor, feel otherwise.
Yeah, and you mentioned something very important in here, the change of practice. I think you have to be very careful. I mean, every teacher has to be very careful when you go through this kind of reflection with the students, because as the old saying says, be careful what you wish, right? Because maybe all this feedback is giving you an impromptu that there needs to be a change in whatever you are believing in that moment, or whatever you are actually doing in that moment. And it may be frustrating as a backwash effect if students don't see a change after they were asked about how things are going, and mention constantly things that they hope that can be changed, and teachers, they don't change that, and that's frustrating for students, and that can create a very a stressful environment, in the sense that yes, it happened before and we could cope with it, but now that you mention it, this is what it's happening and nothing is done about it, right? Somebody said the other day, is there anywhere I can complain about someone? And I was, well, you have to go to this kind of person. Okay, and if I did, who do I complain about this kind of person? I mean, who do I go to complain about this other kind of person? Because nothing is done about it. So I think what you mentioned there is that you have to be prepared in mind and in will to do this change of practice if necessary.
And also make sure that you're guiding students so that they are providing constructive criticism, right? So it might depends on the maturity of the level and their perspective and their history and their backgrounds, but you need to make sure that you're giving them leading questions and examples of the types of reflections that you like, so it just doesn't turn into a complaining, just a complaining session, but that they are constructive in saying, okay, if you don't like a particular class, what would what kind of class would you like? But I think that, you're never going to please everybody all the time. So I think that, again, it can be something new and maybe a challenge to accept that type of feedback. But I still think that the alternative of not receiving it puts you in a worse position, right? So I think it's just a matter of kind of seeing for each teacher the best way to reach out to those students and try to get that direct feedback, because it doesn't have to be necessarily every week. It doesn't have to be necessarily a written text. But that in some way you're reaching out and getting that information.
Ben, I may be jumping a little bit ahead. I don't know if you're gonna talk about this later, but I kind of read that this deliberate practice focuses on the minimals, on the specifics, right? Is it like that? Is it what you read?
Yeah, it is. In fact, let me go through, because this idea of deliberate practice kind of leads into some other aspects, but I think are kind of in line to where you're going with that question. So let me jump to the next point here, because I've got several here that I wanted to try to get to today. So the next point that I wanted to bring up, and this is, again, going back to deliberate practice. Deliberate practice takes a large amount of time. It is acquired over a very long period of time, at least a decade. In fact, they call it the 10-year rule. So this really, I find this really interesting, because we are in a teaching practicum, in a program for teachers. So we're helping students in a BA program to become teachers. So I find this really interesting, this idea of the 10-year rule, and that it kind of leads to this discussion. I'm sure we've all heard of this idea. You need, 10,000 hours. You need this to be an expert in anything, right? So whatever it is, if you're a musician, you have to put in the practice X amount of hours to be quote unquote, proficient or accomplished. So I'm curious about this idea of this, especially in our context. What do we do with this idea of the 10-year rule? How do we bring that into our own context in some meaningful way for our students that we typically only have 3 to 4 years of, I'm thinking practicum classes where they really don't get into the practicum maybe until the last three years of the program or whatever. What do we do with this idea? How does this relate to us?
Well, in fact, I think I was reading in Mihali's idea. In fact, I think it's one of the conferences he gives, when he mentions that it takes 10 years for you to be to have the minimum preparation to start creating. And everything before is just learning, acquiring, adapting. And everything before that period is your preparation. And once you spend this 10-year rule into whatever it is you want to master, you may be ready to start creating something. And I think And I think you make a point there by saying that we have a BA that lasts for 4 years, 5 the most, in case of students who go through the propedeutical year. And but we can. I would make the comparison on the idea that they are on information, they are in preparation, and they have some very few experience, but they do go to the actual field while they're in those 4 or 5 years, and then they totally go full time to the classrooms to start. I would say continuing their formation, and some of them may catch up fast to do things faster, maybe, but I would agree that it takes long because some of us have more than 10 years in this and still haven't created anything yet.
Well, and you know, I'm thinking, you know, this 10-year rule, I agree with the overall concept, the theory of it, but I also think it's kind of an arbitrary number because I think we can also see examples of teachers that have many, many years of experience, but if they're not reflective teachers,
Right.
are they really improving? I mean, do they have set up in their common practice a way to actually turn their experience into learning opportunities? Because, you know, it's easy to see, I think, if we get caught in a rut and we're doing the same thing every day. I mean, we can imagine a case where, you know, we're actually not really learning much at all. We're just going through the motions every year to year and gaining quote unquote experience, but maybe not necessarily gaining knowledge and understandings and further skills. So I think that when I thought about this 10-year rule and I thought about our program and I thought, and just in general, English, your own personal development, professional development, it's really the skills that you set up to become a reflective practitioner. What do you do to turn an experience into a learning experience? What do you do to even recognize that an experience is a learning experience? That some classroom experience is something that you can learn from. And so I think the best that any project or program can do is to find the way to help students, again, become reflective practitioners, basically the topic of today's discussion, so that they have those strategies with them to continue beyond the program when they get into the field and they're working, they're becoming professionals, that they take on those strategies and continue those behaviors so that they continue to learn.
Yeah, I saw when you mentioned about this topic, I saw a short video, very, very short video by Anders Ericsson about deliberate practice, but he's focusing a little bit more on automatic skills somehow. And he actually mentions about this, not as years, but at the 1,000 times. I don't know how many times, 100,000 times you have to do something to master it. And he even gives as example creating cigars, right? And how people, and they have studies about people playing a violin or playing tennis or creating cigars, in which they do it and they take certain amount of time, seconds to make one, and then after doing it the 100,000 times, they diminish the time to a third or things like those, right? But yes, it goes totally with your idea that we're talking about not only doing something automatically, we're talking about reflecting about it. And it brought to my mind something I discussed with Dr. Cecilia Delgado, the psychologist, that we were talking about reflection, and she was saying that naturally there's a study that mentions certain ages for the development of deep reflection, and it's after teenhood, right? And we put a number like around the after 20 years or something like that. And I was mentioning like, am I doing wrong in demanding from my students, which are under that age, like around 17, 18 years old, demanding for them to reflect up to certain degree of critical reflection in that sense? And she was saying that, well, it's just a number, as you mentioned. It's kind of not really arbitrary, but it's kind of just a number, because when you enhance reflection at any age, people start reflecting. So there's not really there's no, indeed, there's not an age. I mean, this is just another study which may consider certain different factors, or maybe just to have mean about the situation in Mexico, maybe, I don't know. But at the end, she was saying like, it's good that you start enhancing this kind of reflecting in younger people, maybe even younger than 17, than 15, so they can develop this capacity of reflection under those principles, making a combination. Well, yes, I go again with you in the idea of the 10 years may be just a number again, just to have a, let's say, a goal, an end line, well, not an end line, but a landmark to reach maybe somehow. But yes, it depends on what you do, how often you do it, and how reflective you become. Because afterwards, this guy Erickson, even though he's mentioning a lot about automatic things somehow and sports and things like those, totally ends up with the idea of reflecting on it, reflecting. And he mentions the planning, reflecting, and evaluating. In fact, somehow he mentioned three kind of aspect which goes around these three. I don't remember exactly which ones, but totally reflection was in the center.
I'm reminded of a story of Yo-Yo Ma, the celloist, the famous celloist that plays classical music. And I remember a story where he shared that the way that he learned, because somebody asked him, how do you memorize all of these pieces, you know, these classical pieces that go on for many minutes, and he's memorized all of these pieces. And he says, well, when I was young, I would take 5 measures. I would learn 5 measures. He learned 5 measures at a time. He would learn the first 5 measures, then he would learn the second 5 measures, and then those 10 measures, and so on. And that's how he continued to learn as an adult, gaining more experience. That's how he learned to memorize all of those. So I think of, in our case with teachers, if we can give them the certain strategies and the actual behaviors of trying to reflect and learn from their experiences, that the idea is that they take those away with them as they gain more experience. They get into the field and they take those and hopefully learn more strategies as they go on. But you know, trying to find or help students find their own way and find the strategies that work best for them for reflective practice. But I thought it was interesting, this 10-year rule. And I think there's some, you know, I think it's important to mention it. But I think that one of the main points for me anyway is this idea of, you know, what kind of strategies really are part of those 10 years, right? Is what are they actually doing in those 10 years, I think means a little bit more than the actual number of years that they assign to this particular.
And maybe the point for stating the rule is exactly that, to make you aware of what we're discussing right now, make you aware that it's not really the 10 years, it's the different processes you make through in order to get to it, right? And the different thoughts that comes to you and the different ways you reflect about it, and how much time you take, how much you invest, right? Not because of the time, because of the investment.
As long as people don't walk away thinking, okay, I've been doing this for 10 years, now I know what I'm doing, without any other consideration, right, of what they did within those 10 years. Okay, I want to jump to the next point here, because I think this is a really interesting point. This is from John Carroll, and this is going back from 1963. So this is nothing new. Again, this is just a summary of different reflections, different ways of looking at teacher reflection. But I think this is still relevant today, and I find it interesting. He breaks it down. He thinks that he considers reflective practice an interplay between 3 things. The first is aptitude. Aptitude he defines as how long it takes a person to learn something. The second is perseverance. Perseverance is how long a person is willing to spend on the subject. And 3, opportunity. Opportunity is how much time a person is allowed to learn something. So looking at this idea of aptitude, how long it takes a person to learn something, perseverance, how long a person is willing to spend on the subject, and opportunity, how much time a person actually has, I think is really important. I think sometimes we take maybe 2 out of these 3. We don't consider the other third aspect. But I think I like this approach because it really looks at these 3 aspects and how they come together. And again, as he mentions, the interplay of these 3 points. And again, in teacher practicum, and as we are in a program for helping teachers become practitioners, how can we incorporate these 3 in some sort of a reflective fashion so that, that they're more aware that this idea of this metacognitive awareness is allowed to happen for the learner and teacher?
Well, let me tell you a little bit what I do, and I want to be very careful about this because I have a couple of students right now watching on Facebook, and I want to be like kind of go step by step in here. People is different. Every individual has their own characteristics. They're different. They have different. They come with natural skills, preformed attitudes, and some knowledge at different levels, and therefore the development in teaching is at different paces. So in pre-service teachers, you need to be, my opinion is that you need to be very observative. I don't know if that's correct. You need to be very careful to know your students and to be analytic on what they do since the very beginning, what they can do, what they are willing to do, and how much they are investing, which I go with these terms, I think with this idea of the aptitude, the perseverance, and the opportunity you mentioned there, and start demanding from them according to their individuality, which is kind of difficult, and it's very, and you need to be very careful when you work in a place where standards are the aim and everybody's measured by the same amount of inches, and you have to know your students first. I would go for that. Know your students first and establish a relationship, establish a connection, and these are topics we have discussed before. Establish a connection with the students in a way that you can actually demand from them at their own level. I've had students before which come to their first simulated practice with great skills, and they do very good things. They are very creative. They can handle groups. They mastered the language, and it looks like they are just in the flow again. And those students still, you need to look for which is the height of the bar that you're going to set for those students and how you're going to make them aware of it. Not creating a conflict with the other students at the same time, which may be really at their first, well, everybody's at their first simulated practice, but which may not be at the same capacities in that sense. I go with this idea of identifying the aptitudes they have, and then work with the perseverance they put on it and the opportunities they have. I think that's the way I cope with it a little bit more, because I tend to ask them and demand from them according to their level, and for some students I even ask them to risk things. Sometimes I tell them, you are at this stage, so you need to risk it and go for these kind of activities. Or for example, this semester, I gave a couple of students the opportunity to go and help another classmate from 7th semester, a higher semester, to substitute her during a week in their actual practice, which is, I mean, it's going to be a big jump from simulated practices to having an actual group and being in there. And but we are doing these kind of things according to students themselves, right? And I think that's pretty much one thing. You need to be very analytic, and more than yourself, you need to understand how to help the students be aware of their attitude, the investment they are doing, the perseverance they are having in there, and how to adapt and adjust the times and the opportunities they have precisely for developing.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, the key, I look at this from two perspectives. One perspective is the teacher trainer, the teacher who is in our program, for example, who is studying, taking courses, and versus those in-service teachers who are in the field. So if we take first those in-service or pre-service teachers, or the teachers in training, the opportunity, of course, is going to be mainly the semester, right? That's pretty much the time frame, and the time frame within a semester. Maybe there are divisions of time where they have only a certain amount of time to achieve a certain, a certain level of skill or knowledge. But I'm curious about the aptitude here. Is you mentioned awareness, and for me, I think helping students or student teachers to become more aware of what they're learning, what they need to learn, for them to understand the gap between where they are now and where they need to be, I think is important. And perseverance, how we as the teachers, to help facilitate this learning process, how can we uh, find out how much they're willing to spend on the subject, how much time, what
Right.
kind of strategies are they using, how are they dedicating their time to this learning of this particular thing,
And
and
let me tell you,
really trying to make those connections between the perseverance and the aptitude. The opportunity for us is fixed, right? And there's some flexibility maybe within the semester, but there's not much room for adjustment in formal education just by design, right? But
right.
I think the perseverance and the aptitude, and bringing about the awareness of the aptitude, and then the reflection, how they articulate or communicate their willingness to spend certain amount of time on a subject, I think is really important, that they can kind of match those two aspects, aptitude and perseverance.
And let me tell you, what I wanted to say is that I'm really lucky in there because the subjects I work on is the actual practicum. So most of the students are actually willing to spend time in that in that situation, because it's what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. When you come to meet somebody that is not really willing to take the time, it's more likely somebody who's going to drop off sooner or later, or is not going to really teach afterwards or dedicate life for teaching. But most of them are willing to do it. And but I wonder how you do it, for example, in your subjects, which are not really the actual practicum, which are like necessary, highly necessary abilities and skills and knowledge they have to develop in order to be professionals indeed in teaching. But at the moment of going through the BA, maybe it's a higher number of students that they don't see it as beneficial as being, for example, in a class teaching and teaching.
Yeah, I think that we can look at it from different types of classes, and I guess each type of class is going to be different. In my case, like you said, I'm more skill based. So my courses are typically more directed towards helping learners become better English speakers and communicators. But yeah, I think it's just a combination of the way, for me personally, how I try to find different ways to evaluate or assess my students through both formative and summative assessment, the ways that I give feedback, the ways that I flip the classroom to give them different opportunities of interacting with the content. And I think a lot of this awareness I'm thinking of the aptitude, how long it takes a person to learn something. I want that to be evident. I want it to be so implied that I don't even necessarily have to articulate it explicitly, right? Just through the way that I'm giving feedback. So if I tell them very simply, remember, you could have done it this way, this way, this way, and we'd already talked about it this way and this way, and we've been talking about it for 3 weeks, right? They're in some way they're saying, okay, I still didn't get it.
Okay.
And then hopefully related to their perseverance, how long they're willing to spend on the subject, they're looking and saying, okay, what I've been doing in the past isn't working. So I need to be changing something and doing something differently. When he says do this, maybe I need to try that. And so I think indirectly, through the way that I have design my assessment and that it's still ongoing and it adapts depending on the student. But I think that this awareness of the aptitude and perseverance, I think, is indirectly, it relates to the way that I assess. And for everybody, I mean, for all teachers, I think that this is what we're maybe not. And and this is why I like this particular idea here, because I've never really thought it explicitly in terms of aptitude, perseverance, and opportunity. But now that it mentioned that, I read and come across this idea, again, this idea is not new, but that I think it helps me anyway to look at how I look at my assessment and how I can try to facilitate the awareness of those three aspects. The last point I want to make about this, and this is really the big question for me, is how does this look? Because for me, there's a big difference between teacher trainers and looking at the interplay between these three and the in-service teacher. Like, okay, so you look at us, for example, teachers who are in the field, other teachers who are in the field. What does this aptitude, perseverance, and opportunity look like now? The opportunity, now you've got how much time is there, right, to learn something? Well, that needs to be now determined by the individual himself or herself, usually, unless the school mandates some sort of learning, objective that says, okay, you need to learn this by this date, which is certainly the case. It could be the case. But if there's no mandate coming from a school or institution, then each teacher needs to bring it upon himself or herself to say, okay, I'm going to set certain goals and I need to try to learn this thing within this given time frame. And we can also look at the aptitude and the perseverance, how much you're willing to spend.
Let me give you an example, a fresh example. Yesterday, I talked to a teacher about this precisely. There's a course, a federal course about the new national educational model. She mentioned they had like more than 100 people in the presentation stage, like in the induction part of the course, right? More than 100 people. And then during this presentation induction, like the intro to the course, they mentioned it's not going to be taken into account for any kind of credits. They're not going to give any kind of recon, and they have to do certain amount of things. It's kind of autonomous learning, but at the same time, they have deadlines to fulfill, and they do have supervisors, so it's not that autonomous. In fact, it's a little bit more controlled than previous courses they have had, in which they do have recons. And more than 100 teachers being there dropped down to less than 25. Less than 25 teachers taking that course, which it's something I think. Now I'm not thinking about 100. I'm thinking about thousands of teachers actually going through the national model of education for whatever reason, and not thinking about politics or other things, thinking about that it's actually the program that it's there, right? So I think that makes a point about what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and I think it also makes a point. I'm just looking at the community here, the Teacher Learning Cast community. Like those who are following on Facebook, those who follow the broadcast live on YouTube, those who go into the Facebook page and leave comments throughout the week, all of that relates to perseverance. Now, whether it's within our community, I'm just using this as an example, or some other community, but what does it take to get a teacher to communicate, to interact with someone else outside of their own school setting? That's, without forget about the teachers you see every day, where you're actually quote unquote forced to see, right? Because I mean, it's a job, you go there, so you're there by obligation, right, to a degree. But what does it take to actually reach out and find another community online through technology to interact with someone for the first time that you've never met, but that you have some sort of common interest? Yeah. What are you willing to do that? And how long is it are you willing to do that in order to increase your skills, and bring it into your own practice, your own reality, your own context. I think this is a huge question, but I think it's at the root of all of our own decisions that we make when we look at our own personal and professional development. Is we're making decisions, whether we are articulating them or not, whether it's implicit or not, or explicit. We're looking at aptitude, perseverance, and opportunity really in terms of, okay, what am I getting out of this? And, how does this help me? Right? Because presumably you're not going to be engaged in a community like this unless you feel that you're getting something out of it, right? Otherwise you just, you feel like you're wasting your time. So that's the thing. I think that when we look at being reflective practitioners, as much as we can make these three explicit, I think the better. I think when we look at what is reflective teaching, I think it's making explicit what our aptitudes are, being honest about ourselves, right? And really identifying our own strengths and weaknesses. Our perseverance, looking at actually what the time that we're dedicating. Like for us, we said, okay, every Saturday morning we're going to do this. We're going to dedicate this time. How much time are we going to allow for the opportunity to actually learn something? Okay, we set individual goals and we communicate those in some way. And so that's, I think, the main points for me, looking at, again, this is John Carroll. This is an idea that is not new, but I think it's worth bringing up again because I think it's still very much relevant in some of the decisions we make, especially when we look at teacher professional development, our own teacher professional development, as well as those that of our colleagues, whether we're in teaching programs or not. Even if we're just interacting with another teacher, just being aware of their aptitudes, their perseverance, and their opportunities, I think also helps us see how we all kind of work together, or perhaps don't work together in those cases where this interplay doesn't really gel or come together.
Well, it's all about attitudes and behaviors, right? Indeed, attitudes and behavior, that means character. It's about character. Jaime Escalante mentioned, I don't know if you saw the movie Stand and Deliver, very famous movie for teachers. And Jaime Escalante mentions, what does it take to do it? Ganas, the will to do it. That's what it takes. I would put it in a word like passion. I'm looking at it from the point of view. I mean, I live in different social circles and professional circles. And I see the same thing in all of them. For some of the professionals there, it's life. It's totally life. For some teachers, teaching is totally life. For some musicians, music is life. For some doctors, health and healthcare, it's life. For dentists, all the hygiene and everything that they have to do to care about the dental health, it's life. And for some others, is not. So I think it's a matter of passion and getting, there's a saying that when you do what you like, you're not really working. You're having you're enjoying your hobby and they're paying you for doing it, right? And I like that idea in that sense. And I think it's you don't have to take it like this is your life. You can take it like this is part of your life and enjoy it as part of your integral part of life, in order to make it part of your character, to transform these attitudes and those behaviors, which totally cope with the idea of the aptitude, the perseverance, and the opportunity. And I also go with the idea of the challenge and the skills you have. When we talked about the flow, remember we talked about not only the skills, but everything else that goes around as a human being, as an integral human being. It all starts in yourself, in the attitude you put towards it, and make the best of it. And maybe if you find out it's not your thing, at least right? Because if you never put this willingness, this passion into what you are doing, you will never know if it's really yours or not. You will only go navigating a little bit through here, a little bit through there. But when you actually dedicate some time, when you actually go through this deliberate practice and you try to keep on flowing and changing this paths towards, I think all of this reflecting, it's exactly what gives you a little bit the opportunity to realize if it is your thing or not. And you may face with the bitter truth that it's not your thing. Okay, so go and try another thing, right? But at least try it, because just having a glance at it, it's may not be enough for you to know.
Yeah, when you said ganas, right? You have to have you need ganas. You need the will, the drive to do it. The first thing that I thought about my own case, and I thought about, well, what drives me to write a blog? What drives me to do Teacher Learning Cast every week? What drives me to share a lot of what I do face to face with my students publicly online? What drives me? And I can say, okay, well, maybe I have ganas, right? Maybe, I don't know, I just have the will, but where does that come from? For me personally, when I interact with someone, and I think we're all to a degree like this, if we, for example, you and I are having a conversation, if nobody attends, nobody shows up, nobody watches, nobody leaves feedback, it's just you and me discussing things regarding education, things we've been talking about, I leave the conversation like, okay, I feel like I've learned something. Now, either it's something that maybe I already knew and I feel stronger about it, or maybe there's something else that a new perspective was brought up that I should consider later on, whatever it is. But I feel like there was some value in having that conversation. When I post something to my blog, I feel like just the act of sharing that information is a learning experience. So for me, I think that's at the root of all teacher development, is each teacher finding that space, whether it's online, face-to-face, whatever it happens to be, wherever it happens to be, if it's in Facebook or Twitter, wherever, but finding those spaces where that kind of communication can happen, and thinking selfishly that you are benefiting. Like, I can say, having this discussion here, I'm being selfish because I feel like I'm getting a lot out of this. I'm learning something, right? And even if nobody else watches, I feel like I get something out of it. But the more people that interact, more perspectives are being shared, then it scales. It actually can grow that knowledge base by having other opinions brought into the conversation. So I think that it's really finding what drives people, what drives you, right, to motivate you to interact and converse with others in topics that you feel strongly about. And I guess the main assumption here is that if you're a teacher and you enjoy teaching, you enjoy learning. That's really the assumption, right? If you're in a position where you're teaching but you don't like to learn, then this conversation really is not really for you, right? So I think one of the assumptions is that the teachers that we're addressing here are those who really like to learn new things and talk about topics that they feel passionate about with regard to their teaching practice.
Yes, and on my end, I can tell you that my perspective right now, my feel is that the world itself, as big as it sounds, it's looking for individualism and for people to be on their own, to develop human beings who can deal with life by their own, on their own, with no attachments, with nothing else. And that's my perception, and I don't want to get into any argument about this, but to make the point that I go on the other way, on the intrapersonal relationship, which is totally needed, which is we are social human beings. We need from each other precisely. I think there are still communities, native communities, in which father is every member of the community for the kids, because everybody else in the community raised them as if they were fathers. Maybe this is like the extreme end, right, of the comment, but pretty much that's the idea. This sharing, this interconnection with other people, this talking, this talking it out loud. And I mean, to begin with, it's not the same to put it in your mind that to put it out in loud words that actually make sense. That's the beginning beyond whatever capacity you have. And I would go for the idea that if you whatever your capacity is, whichever expertise you have, or how good you are at something, if you put it out loud, and then you can see the reflection of your words in the other person or the other group of persons, and then you get feedback, maybe not spoken feedback, just by there's an article about a teacher that says, I just look at their eyes, just look at their eyes, and that's the beginning too. I mean, putting it out loud in words, looking at people's reactions, and then listening to other people talking about the same idea. I think this is what it is about, right? What it is about when we are talking about learning. And you can go beyond, and that's why I put the example of this. I don't remember the name of the communities in which they all raise the kids as if all they were fighters. They go beyond words and learning and knowledge. They go live. They live live in that way.
Right. And yeah, I think one of the things important that you mentioned for me is really reflecting at different levels. And that happens to be one of the models that they also talk about in the book, is that, you know, you can reflect individually, in pairs and groups within the schools. And they don't talk about this in the book, but you can expand that obviously between schools. So, you know, taking the reflective practice at those different levels, even beyond the school and within schools, I think really is, if you can achieve that within a school, as a school, I think you're taking reflection to a new level. I mean, it really goes beyond just a one-to-one or even a group reflective practice, that it really takes it to a new level, just much of what you're saying, Piry. But I think we're almost out of time here. We're at about an hour. We like to keep these to an hour. But this discussion that was really helpful for me, Piry. I enjoy this discussion. I think this is something that we needed to talk about, to provide some different perspectives on reflective practice. I think something that we'll be talking about a lot going forward, because it's a topic that I think we both feel strongly about. But I want to thank everyone for watching this broadcast, and reach out and ask if you want to be a part of this broadcast. Check out our page in Facebook, Teacher Learning Cast. Leave us comments. Share your experiences. How do you reflect? How do you reflect in your own teaching practice? If you're teaching now, or if you're a pre-service teacher, how are you reflecting? What are some ways that you could reflect that you perhaps aren't doing currently that would allow you to further your own professional development? Let us know what your thoughts are. Post them in Facebook. Post it in YouTube as a comment below this video. And we'll find them, and we will reply. We like to always reply to the comments as you post them. So, Piry, thanks a lot for this talk this week.
Right, thank you, Ben. I want to thank everybody that is joining through Facebook Live. Chio Rahel, who is joining us every week almost. Thank you very much for being with us. Ricardo Vasquez is also joining us every week. Thank you for watching. Angelica, Rudy Hernandez, Fernando Aguila, Leticia Padilla, Mariana Ramirez, my student from first semester. They're right now in the stage of observation, and Alma Zaragoza, Randy also connected himself. And thank you very much for coming and going. We have already 23 programs with this one. You can go back and watch any topic you're interested on, and you can ask us to retake and recover some of the aspects or expand, because many times we just cover very superficially some topics. This reflection topic, that's why I didn't want to get that much into it, because we've been talking about this for 2 weeks, and we can go, well, 3 weeks maybe, and we can go on and on and on and on about this. And I think it's good that we do. So if you want to listen to something specific, if you have a question, let us know. Not because we know it all, but because we can Google it and we can discuss about it.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see everyone next week in the next broadcast next Saturday. Thanks, everybody.
Keep on learning.